Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteus and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Now, as Ukraine faces another bitter winter of war, children remain at the heart of a humanitarian crisis that has destroyed homes, schools and communities, leaving millions displaced in the region. At the same time, UNICEF struggles to meet and reach frontline areas where power outages, water shortages and constant strikes threaten a total collapse of essential services. Yet, amid the devastation, moments of hope endure. Children returning to makeshift classrooms, communities rebuilding together, and UNICEF workers helping to restore safety, learning, and of course, childhood itself. To talk about this and this ongoing situation is Toby Fricker, who is the Chief of Advocacy and Communications at UNICEF Ukraine. Toby works to protect the lives of children living through the war in the Ukrainian conflict, and he also supports UNICEF's global emergency response team in various regions, including Amman, Gaza and Syria. Thank you very much for joining us, Toby. It's a pleasure to have you here on the programme. Of course, my first question to you is, UNICEF has now been operating in some of the hardest hit areas of Ukraine, a war that is entering its fourth year. What stories or conditions from the field best capture the daily reality for children living through this devastating war?
Thanks so much, Thomas, for having me on and having UNICEF on today. I think the war, of course, has impacted every aspect, every part of childhood for every child in Ukraine. You've had the war in the east now for more than 11 years, and of course 4 years since the start of the full-scale war, which has had a massive impact on the daily lives of children. I mean, you just take, for example, 15-year-old Kira, who I met not so long ago in Sumy, which is a town in the northeast. And she was, it's been hit very hard there. It's close to the border. There are regular attacks. It's not a safe area. But having said that, she managed to go back to school. So she just started going back to school. And then literally a couple of weeks later, there was another attack that really badly damaged the school, which meant she was out again. And thankfully, she was safe because her apartment was very close to that actual school that was hit, and it was actually damaged as well. She was okay. Her friends were lightly injured. But that impact, she was going back to school. She was saying how pleased she was to reconnect with friends, reconnect with teachers, to start some kind of normalcy again, normal childhood. But that all ended again after that attack. So what you see is every day something can change. It's so uncertain, and particularly now as we enter the winter, there's another threat to young lives.
And of course, and nearly every report, Toby, mentions the trauma children face, not just displacement, but constant fear and loss. How is UNICEF addressing the psychological scars of a generation growing up under Russian bombardment?
Yeah, that's right. The psychological impact is massive on children, on everyone, but especially children. So what UNICEF is doing, we're working with multiple partners, we're working with the government and many others to really put in place the services, the systems to try and strengthen the response today. Because what we do know is if children, young children, teenagers, adolescents can get the support they need today, it can have a massive impact. It can really help them to better cope with the situation now and to recover in the future. And that means, for example, we have a social services hub in different cities where we're training people, ordinary people, so it could be teachers, it could be anyone in the community, on what to look out for. What are the risk signs when children are affected by psychological issues? How can they work at a community level to provide the care and support that children need? So it's that awareness of what are these issues that children might face, and then really empowering caregivers, empowering social workers, and training a new cohort of social workers to then provide that service. But importantly, provide that service within the community, so where it's needed most, of course, so families can access better services, quality, inclusive social services, which includes counselling, for example. So we work with social workers, we work with teachers, we work with the systems to try and strengthen that, to provide better services today, but that will also then have an impact in the coming years and for the future of Ukraine.
Toby, winter is setting in over Eastern Europe now, under war conditions, of course. What are UNICEF's immediate priorities to keep children, civilians, warm, safe, and in school?
So the immediate priority in UNICEF's winter response plan is to bolster the district heating systems. And these are quite complex, quite heavy infrastructure, but it's absolutely critical infrastructure because it not only keeps homes warm, but it also keeps hospitals and schools warm. And that's one of our core priorities. So it hasn't started now. We've been working since early summer to start bringing in new infrastructure, new systems, new equipment that can help those boiler houses, as many of them are called in local areas, to have new equipment that's more efficient, more effective, that can keep running during these winter months. It's also about keeping water flowing. So these big water infrastructure, which is a mandate of UNICEF as well. So working to repair when there's damage, to repair the network, repair pipes, to keep the water flowing, which actually feeds into the heating systems as well. So that's absolute critical work, because we know there's been about $2.5 billion of damage since the start of the war on these heating systems. Secondly, we're also providing cash assistance to households, 45,000 households to date in frontline areas. We know from the last winters, and we've learned from the last winters, and families have said the most effective thing is if they have that additional bit of cash to be able to prioritize their children's needs. That might be clothes, solid fuel, which they can heat their own homes, and other items. So these are really vital areas that we're focusing on right now. Yes,
and Toby, of course, millions of children have been displaced or separated from family, possibly as refugees in other countries. How is UNICEF tracing, reuniting, or protecting these unaccompanied minors from exploitation or, of course, trafficking?
Yeah, I mean, the priority, of course, in Ukraine, in any war, of course, is that children are with their families, with their caregivers, in loving, nurturing environments. And that's number one, that's absolutely vital. So we work with, for example, the Ministry of Social Policy. We work with other partners on the ground to provide that reintegration support for children returning. That might be families who come back for one reason to an area that's a little bit safer, maybe in the West. It might be for children who were evacuated at the start of the war in institutions, some of the most vulnerable children who have also come back. And what we're trying to do then is immediately provide that sort of family tracing support, but importantly then that reintegration into communities. So case management, which means a child protection worker working closely with an individual child, providing tailored support for that child to be able to get to their families and get the community services that he or she needs.
And of course, Toby, there has been repeated strikes on power, water, and of course, most importantly, schools. How close is Ukraine to a full-scale collapse of essential services for children in frontline regions, mainly in the east, of course?
Yeah, I mean, the systems in the east are under massive strain. And that's, like you said, water, district heating, schools, pretty much every part of infrastructure in the community. And the winter just brings that next bit of strain. We know that there have been around 759 attacks on energy infrastructure this year alone. So that really shows the scale of that. And that's why it's so important to bolster the services, to not only make those repairs when we can, when the water technicians, these brave people who are going out to repair networks, as soon as there's been a damage, to make that repair. But it's also about trying to improve the system as a whole, across the country, actually improve the networks so they run as smoothly as possible, provide shelters that are child friendly in schools so children can keep learning as much as they can. And we're providing grants for schools during the winter in the frontline areas to do their own winter repairs and to prepare for the winter months as well.
And of course, according to your organisation, UNICEF, around 4.6 million children in Ukraine face ongoing educational barriers heading into the 25-26 academic year. This is, of course, due to disrupted schooling, damaged infrastructure, and displacement. What is UNICEF doing? What can it do to help combat that?
Yeah, well, number one, right now, it's about trying to get children back into school, and that means physically, safely, physically into classrooms, because we know that is the best way to learn. But not only learn, it's about holistic development. It's about engaging with their peers, with teachers as well. And so we're working, and many other partners are working as well, to provide, like I said, child-friendly shelters, to make sure if there are air raid alerts or attacks, children can be obviously safe at that time. It's about keeping children learning online when they have to, when it's not safe to be in school. And it's about learning recovery, so making sure that we provide classes like digital learning centers are providing some catch-up classes for children to try and get it back up to where they should be or where they would normally be if it wasn't for the war. And it's also about early childhood, so it's about providing that start in early childhood, that preschool education, preschool care to build the foundations for learning and development.
Yeah, and finally, what, Toby, gives you hope, and what examples of resilience or community action have stood out to you after months of field work in such difficult conditions?
Yeah, I mean the resilience and the hope is always there, particularly in children. And yeah, I was in a school recently, again in the Northeast, at the first bell ceremony, which is the opening of the school year. And there was grade 1 and there was the final grade there as well. So there was the 17-year-old Irina who was speaking about how good it was just to be at that opening ceremony for the school year, but also saying, this is her life. She's determined to make the most of it despite what's going on. And there was this determination, which was just really incredible to see, and almost like this sort of hope that she's going to make something, whatever happens, she's going to make something of her life. And then there was the Nazar, this little boy who was just starting school, in a shelter underground for the first bell, and the hope that that is the last time this boy has to do that. So it was really those two extremes of starting school and ending, and the challenges that brings, but also that hope coming through of just being there with their peers, being at the opening of the school year and saying, we're going to do what we can to get through this and to really survive, but also thrive in life.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Toby Fricker, for speaking to us on Focal Length. Pleasure to get your insight on that situation. And with that, it's a wrap on this episode of Focal Length. For more international news, information and updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.